What is up, guys? In today's video, I'm going to be going over the 3 sprites that I think are the most underrated so far in Season 3. As always, if you guys do enjoy this video, find it helpful, informative, or interesting, remember to give it a like, subscribe if you would like to see more, comment down below which sprite you think is most underrated, and if you guys would like to use my code in the shop when getting anything, it is EvolvedJake, just like my channel name is, and it is underneath the webcam at all times. So, if you have seen other videos of mine this season about the sprites, you probably know that my 2 favorites for zero build are going to be the boss sprite and the ghost sprite, but there are a few other sprites that I also think are pretty good, even though I don't, seek them out as much. The first is going to be the fishy sprite. This one sounds pretty underwhelming initially. It will make you swim faster and give you boosted movement speed after taking damage. And like I said, on paper, that sounds really underwhelming. Like, swimming faster really isn't that big of a deal. But the second part is what makes it good. Having boosted movement speed whenever you take damage means that in most fights, you're going to have a movement or, movement speed advantage on the enemy. Because in a lot of fights, you and the enemy are going to be trading shots back and forth, and you're probably going to take some amount of damage. But once the sprite kicks in, you will start moving faster, making yourself harder to track, harder to, keep up with, and potentially make it to where you maybe get around corners that you wouldn't otherwise. Just having boosted movement speed in a fight is surprisingly good. A lot of people are going to think about just, having better movement in a fight. It's more likely that you break the enemy's camera. If you're moving faster, it's more likely that it's difficult for the enemy to track you. And it's something that's different. Like, the enemies get used to an opponent moving at a certain speed or a certain way. And then when you just suddenly are moving faster because you have this sprite and you've taken damage, it's something that can make the fight pretty strange for your opponent. So I think this fishy sprite is somewhat decent. If you're trying to get away from a fight, obviously having better movement speed would be better. If you took some damage and the enemy is trying to run from you, obviously having that better movement speed would be better. And then just your base movement in a fight is going to be better as well. Also, if you're ever in the storm at any point during the game, you will move faster because, being in the storm makes you take damage. And so anytime you'll be in the storm, you'll be moving faster, which will allow you to loot faster if you're looking for sprites or anything like that, or get out of the storm faster if you are actually trying to get into the safe area. So I think the fishy sprite is pretty decent, and a lot of people aren't really talking about it. The next is going to be the dream sprite. This one I think is quite good, and it is something that I will pick up early game if I don't already have a sprite. What the dream sprite does is every time it levels up, you get loot from it until eventually at level 5, where it, once you reach max level, you get even more loot, typically gold weapons, often self-revive, and then the sprite will extract itself. And the reason why this loot can be pretty helpful is because you have a decent chance of getting overdrives from this, and then I've also gotten shock rocks as well. And so if you're in the mid to late game, this probably isn't something that I would really seek out. But in the early game especially, I think it is pretty good because you're going to be looting in the early game anyways. And just by looting and opening chests and opening containers, maybe getting a few kills, you're going to level this sprite up. And if you've used a campfire at all, you're going to level it up really quickly. And so when I do get this off spawn, I often am able to get it to level 5 by the time or close to level 5, by the time I finish looting my initial POI, and hopefully that has set me up with more overdrive grenades or shock rocks, because these mobility items are very good. If you're playing team game modes, the self-revive can be really helpful, but in solos, it's rarely that useful in solos, but just the potential mobility is really nice. One of the biggest things that I want to avoid in the early game is looting my entire POI or looting my entire loot path and then ending up with no mobility. And just having this dream sprite as a little bit of extra insurance on that aspect is pretty nice. And it's something that can help you a lot. Those games where you get no overdrives at all or no shock rocks at all, they feel really slow, and it feels like any fight you get in is probably just going to be, pretty random. You don't have mobility to chase an enemy down. You don't have mobility to reset the fight if needed. It's just a struggle. And with the most recent update, they added so much bloat to the loot pool that it can be an absolute struggle to get overdrives. And so this dream sprite just giving you more chances to get what you need helps a lot. This probably isn't something that I would, buy back with dust and want to take into the game. But like I said, in those matches when I find this in the early game, or, maybe even in the mid game if I don't have a sprite yet, it's something I'm decently happy to take because it just does its thing. Hopefully it gets you more mobility. And then at the end, it extracts itself. And on Monday, there's double dust. And so if you do want to get more dust, but you don't really want to play around farming sprites or anything like that, just using this dream sprite when you find it and leveling it up, once you get it to level 5, it extracts itself. And so you get the dust for it that way without really having to worry about actually extract it. So if you are trying to get dust, it can be a nice little way to do that without altering your game too much, which is another little nice benefit of it. But the main reason why I think this sprite is overrated is because you have a decent chance of getting a mobility. The final sprite that I think is actually really good is going to be the aura sprite. This gives you shock rock charges as you damage enemies. And this is obviously great because it gives you mobility for doing something that you were probably going to be doing anyways. If you damage an enemy, you know, you'll get your shock rock charges, and then that can help you in the fight. But also, the shock rocks is just a great movement item to have in a fight. Being able to do this jumps makes it, you know, easy for you to close the distance on an opponent if that's something you're trying to do. If an enemy is trying to escape, they're pretty good for chasing them. And then even if you and the enemy are engaged in a fight where they're like actively shooting back and trying to fight you, this movement advantage you get from having the shock rocks can completely throw the opponent's aim off and make the fight much easier for you, especially if you have the extending focus shotgun. It pairs incredibly well with these shock rocks. And if the enemy is using something that isn't the extending focus shotgun, like let's say they're using the striker pump or the maven, you can often create enough distance in the fight to where their shotgun really isn't that great anymore, which is going to be a huge advantage. And with the shock rocks, you only have 3 charges on your character at a time. And if you do all 3 jumps in quick succession, you travel really far. And this can be great for pushing enemies, getting away from enemies, resetting fights, whatever you got to do. And because of this, I want to have 3 charges as often as possible. When somebody pushes you with the shock rocks, you get pretty much no audio. And oftentimes this season, if someone pushes you with overdrives, you might also get no audio. In those like weird timing fights, it can just be the end of your game just based on bad timing with how fast the time to kill is. And the only counter really to that situation so far this season, I feel like, is having shock rock charges of yourself. If a fight starts on bad timing for you, just use all 3 dashes and you're out of there and you're safe. But because of that, it makes it to where I always want to have 3 charges on my character at all times. And that makes me like hesitant to use it in a fight at times. Like if I'm fighting somebody and I think I can kill them without using the dash, I'm really going to try to do that just to conserve the amount of charges I have, because I always want to have 3 charges. If I end up using 1 in a fight and then I only have 2 remaining, I feel really inclined to use an extra shock rock out of my inventory just to get that 1 additional charge. That way I have that like kind of insurance policy against terrible timing. But with the aura sprite, since you're getting the charges back for dealing damage to an enemy, I feel much more like free to use the charges in a fight, because I know I'm going to get more over the course of the fight. And even if you use all 3 pushing an opponent and you don't just eliminate them immediately, having this aura sprite to get you 1 in the fight, you know, that you can actually use to get that movement advantage is really nice. So it frees me up to use the jumps more in a fight. I end up conserving shock rocks out of my inventory, which is obviously beneficial for if you do ever have to use it. And then if you do use them in a fight, you're more likely to get them back. And so you can use them more in the fight or more to address third parties. It just makes the entire aspect of the shock rocks in a way where you can use it without really thinking about the consequences of using it as much, because you're probably going to get some back for dealing damage to enemies. I don't feel like this sprite is a full replacement for carrying the shock rock item. It's still definitely something I want to carry, but it's really helpful in a lot of situations because you want to have 3 charges as much as possible. And like I said, that leads to me being hesitant to use them in a fight. When I have this aura sprite, I don't feel as hesitant to use them in a fight. And so I could just win more fights because I'm spamming the charges more. So I think the aura sprite is really good. I don't think it's on the level of the boss sprite or the ghost sprite, but I think it's something really good. And I'm sure a lot of people are probably thinking, sure, these sprites might be underrated, but why would I care? I'm just going to use the best ones. And, you know, if you want to buy them back with dust every time, that's completely fine. Do what you want to do. But a lot of games, I either didn't feel like buying one back with dust or I just forgot to, especially streaming. I'm often not really paying attention to the game in between games. So if I ever forget to equip a sprite, or maybe, you know, get eliminated and lose it and get rebooted or something, if I find one of these sprites, I'm, you know, decently likely to take them if I haven't found one that I want. So if I have no sprite, boss would be the one I want most, ghost would be second, then probably aura, dream if it's really early on in the game, and then if I don't have any of those, I may end up taking the fishy sprite, because the boosted movement speed you get after taking damage can actually be pretty helpful in a fight. But that is going to be it for this video. As always, if you guys did find this video to be helpful, informative, or interesting, remember to give it a like, subscribe if you'd like to see more. Comment down below what sprite you think is underrated and which one you might be likely to take if you don't have access to the other ones you like. And I will see you guys in the next one. Thanks for watching.